Welcome to All About Capital Campaigns, a podcast that provides fuel for your nonprofit's growth. Each week, hosts Andrea and Amy Eisenstein, co-founders of the Capital Campaign Toolkit, provide practical tips about raising more money for your nonprofit organization. The Capital Campaign Toolkit is a support system for nonprofit leaders who are running capital campaigns. At capitalcampaigntoolkit.com, you can download a step-by-step guide for your capital campaign and get many other free resources. This podcast is recorded on a live webinar every Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You can join the live session and get your questions answered by signing up today at toolkittalks.com.
What do we mean by a campaign mindset? Now, we first started thinking about that because one of our capital campaign consultant members, Barry Derringer, who's often on these calls, but I haven't seen him yet today, he actually sent a very thoughtful email saying that he had read a bunch of the material that we had put out, and he thought that it would we remind him of the importance of a campaign mindset. And that, of course, got us actually thinking about a campaign mindset. So thank you. Hey, Derry, there you are. Thank you, Derry. It really has sort of generated a lot of thinking and conversation for us here at the Toolkit. I thought I would dive into that in this way. The question, of course, is, well, what do we mean by a campaign mindset? And I think what we mean by a campaign mindset is top down rather than bottom up. Right? That's really the way it struck me. There are many, many organizations that come to us that say, we are starting a campaign and we've created our brochure and we've sent it to 500 people and we got 2 gifts.
Or maybe you got 50 gifts or 100 gifts
right.
of $25.
That's right, exactly. And we really do hear that. And we can almost always tell when an organization has been working with someone as a consultant out of the advertising industry. Because people in the advertising industry are never thinking top down and narrow, they're always thinking broad and wide. Now, that's a perfectly appropriate way to think in some circumstances, but it's not a perfectly appropriate way to think when you are doing a capital campaign.
Not at the beginning of your campaign.
Not at the beginning.
It's for the public phase and the very end of your campaign, not at the beginning of your campaign.
Right. That's right. And, the quiet phase of the campaign goes on a very long time. So let me if you were to say, well, all right, 1 to 100 as, the duration of your campaign, about 80 or 85 or even 90% of that is this top-down campaign mindset thinking. Now, the other and related piece, which interests me just about as much, is that with top-down thinking, you are also always building structures of people, ad hoc committees and groups and teams of people by sort of reaching out in sort of building your community by starting with the people who are the leaders and have the potential to make the biggest gifts or the board members, and then getting them to help you draw in a few more people. So you are building your team with a very high level sort of set intention, right, of drawing in the people who are leaders, philanthropic leaders or political leaders or leaders by virtue of the clout and the power they have within your community. So that top-down mindset is not just a top-down in terms of the dollars that you need, though it is that too. It's also a way of thinking that says, all right, who can help us now build out, get more people involved at the top level of what we're doing. And that very narrow focus of pulling in 2 or 3 or 4 people who can really move the bar for you and your organization is essential for capital campaign mindset, right? Essential. That's the way we build campaigns. Now, as Amy says, the longer you go, the broader you get, but you have to be willing to sort of to face that, to use it, to understand that thinking. You never in a capital campaign do something that says, well, now I'm going to write a case for support and then it's going to be done. You always say, now I'm going to write a draft of a case for support and then I'm going to pull in 3 or 4 people who for some reason or another are powerful in our community and I'm going to get them to review it for me. That's a campaign mindset. Right? Using a draft stamp everywhere, using the process to engage more people that you want to engage who may or may not be on your board. Right? Those are such important strategies. And in most of the rest of fundraising, they fall away. But in what we do, they are critical. Does that make sense to you, Amy?
Yes. All right. I have a thing to add, but I want to invite everybody on the call to add. What do you think about when we say campaign mindset, or when you think of campaign mindset? What does that mean to you? What does that evoke in your mind? So in the chat box, go ahead and let us know. We'll read some of them out. Also, John, I noticed you're writing us a question in the chat box. That goes by too quickly for us. I need you to go ahead and open up the Q&A box and stick your question in there. That would be super helpful for us so that we can find it later. All right, good. Let's read some of these wonderful comments. And then, I want to add one of my own, but Gary's saying top down, inside out. Rick says it means that you start and you do not quit. Yep. Good. Lynn, be a part of a successful movement. Okay. Jacqueline, bigger versus smaller thinking and bigger versus smaller execution. Yes. Think big for a campaign, right? That's the campaign mindset. Have a big vision. Jamie's saying have a goal and sticking to it. Yeah, really specific goal. Love it. So many good comments and the others that are jumping out to you, Andrea, that you want to.
Lori, I'm not sure quite what this means. That everything done for X time is. I'm not sure quite what that means, Lori. Maybe I'm not getting it.
Okay. Go ahead and keep writing. All right. Making a plan and implementing it. So what I wanted to add was about fundraising for specific things. In a campaign, in an annual fund mindset, we really want to fundraise often for generic operating fund, annual operating, generic fundraising. In a campaign, when a campaign mindset, we pull specific things out that we want to raise money for. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't raise any money for the operating budget. Of course, you want operating. The question is, how do we look at our budget and our vision and strategically pull things out to ask for? So we might ask for technology. To enhance our technology. That might be in your budget anyways. You want to be doing that. But when you talk to donors specifically about your technology needs, that's part of a campaign mindset, making sure that things are tangible and concrete, that they can wrap their minds around. So, sometimes it's a building. Not all the time it's a building. It might be programs. It might be services. There are lots of things that you can raise money for using a campaign mindset, whether you're in a campaign or not. So that's another point we want to make before we turn to the questions, is that you can use this campaign mindset even when you're not in a formal campaign. Going to the biggest donors first, having a big vision, asking for specific gifts. What else, Andrea?
Yeah, another related to what you were saying, Amy, is the focus on impact.
Yes.
That you have to be able to articulate, well, what difference is it going to make? Right? If we raise this money and we do such and such with it, what difference is it going to make? What difference is it going to make to people's lives? Mm-hmm. And if you can really focus on that, it's amazing what starts to happen to your mindset, right? That changes everybody's mindset.
Excellent. All right. We're getting great questions pouring in now. So let's turn to some of them.
Great.
The first one is from Amy, not from me, of course. Amy S. says, do you have any recommendations on a tool to thank donors via video? And we are contemplating a capital campaign and would like to send donors videos over emails as one thanking option. So I will turn to the chat box again to ask who is using thank you videos to thank their donors. But I will tell you that a tool that I haven't used personally, but I've actually looked at it several times and I think it looks fantastic, is called Thank View. Is anybody using Thank View? All right, so let's see.
So I do have something else to say about that, which is that I think the idea of using videos to thank donors is terrific, as long as they are individualized. Right? There's nothing like getting an individualized thank you. I gave a gift, I don't know, last summer, I think, to a music organization that I support, a small offbeat music organization, and they literally went up to the roof of their building. Again, remember, I'm here in New York City. They go up to the roof of their building. About 7 musicians go up to the roof of their building with their instruments, and they sort of honk for a minute and wave at me and say, Andrea, thank you. I was truly touched. It was nothing fancy. It was fun.
All right. So I want to just read some of these chat suggestions for those people that are listening later on the podcast. There's something called Buongiorno, recommended by Teresa. Susie's recommending Good Kind, based in Toronto, but available anywhere. Let's see. Lauren Comera is recommending Thank View at Comera. Let's see. Are there others? Bomb. Renee's recommending Bomb. So anyways, lots of things out there, I think, to recommend. Lots of thank video, and something Allison's recommending GrataVid.
Put the link there for you. Great. Thank you, Allison.
All right, let's go ahead on over to Mary's question here. Mary says, I'm starting to plan out cultivation events and see that there are lots of resources on our website. Great. Thanks for visiting our website at Capital Campaign Toolkit, Mary. Wondering if you have any tips for pivoting to COVID-friendly capital campaign cultivation events, and wondering if the group has any tips. We may be able to host some in person over the late summer too. So, Andrea, you want me to start? You want to start in terms of cultivation
Why
events?
don't you start?
All right.
Allison McElroy, would you post that to panelists and attendees, the link, please? It only went to panelists.
All right. So listen, Mary, I think, if you've been on this call before, it will not surprise you to hear us say that you should be first and foremost cultivating donors in a personalized one-on-one way. So before we dive into events, there's a time and place for both cultivation and stewardship events in nonprofits, but I don't want it to take such a big place in the campaign that you're not cultivating donors individually. For a capital campaign, you really want to make sure that you're having individual one-on-one conversations. And you can do that over Zoom. You can do that over the phone. Be creative. We're recommending going on a walk with donors these days in a COVID-friendly way if you can. Actually, I've heard some wonderful results of people inviting their donors for walks when they might normally sit in an office or sit in a coffee shop. Get out. You'll have a better conversation if you're walking around on a trail or through the neighborhood or whatever it is. So I think that start out without the big event and the group mentality. Cultivation has many meanings, but if it's about relationship building, it's about getting to know people one-on-one and what their needs and desires and philanthropic interests are. You can't do that in a group setting. I know people are going to disagree with me on this one, but a cultivation event is almost an oxymoron, right? Now, on the one hand, you can announce a campaign. You can introduce your project in a group setting. And that may be for either really early or later on during the campaign in the public phase. But to me, I just want to remind everybody, cultivation, true, good, solid cultivation, relationship building is done one-on-one. All right, now we can talk about cultivation events if you want.
Yeah, but Amy, before you talk about cultivation events, a better kind of event is an advice event. I just made that up, but it's true. Right?
Is that a group event or a one-on-one?
A small group event. You can say, I'm going to send you a draft of our case for support. We're inviting 6 people to come and discuss it with us. Here are the things we'd like you to consider before coming to the meeting. It's an event. It's on Zoom. It's easy. It gives people something to do, and you'll learn a lot from it. And they will feel like they helped you, right? That is a cultivation event, but it's much more effective than, cultivation event is like, I want to get to know you. Amy, come to my house. I want to get to know you. Well, I know why she knows why I want to get to know her. That's nonsense. If I say to her, Amy, I know you're an expert writer. Would you give me advice about this piece? She will have moved the relationship forward. So one thing to play with is what happens if we get rid of the word cultivation? What happens if we stop using that word and instead start saying, let's start thinking about advice. Let's start thinking about help. Let's start thinking about, wanting to find out the lay of the land by talking to 10 of our largest donors to find out how they're feeling about this organization and the community. What if instead of, cultivation is this funny word that it sort of demeans the purpose of it because it's masquerading, right, as something that's not real. So that's that for being provocative.
Excellent. Mary's also asking for tips from the group. So in the chat, if you've done any creative cultivation events or whatever we're going to call them, and you want to share with Mary and the rest of everybody, feel free to chat it in. All right, let us go to Jacqueline. Go ahead, Andrea.
She's asking about whether we know fundraising strengths assessment and we've ever used it. I'm not sure what that is, Jacqueline, but one thing I am very familiar with is the asking styles assessment. So I don't know if you've taken it. Everybody on the call should go to askingmatters.com and take the asking styles assessment and get your board members or your solicitors or your executive director to take the asking styles assessment. It's quick, it's free, and it gives you immediate results. And it's actually quite interesting and provocative. So, but I don't know what you're specifically referring to, Jacqueline. Yes, Teresa, you're a kindred spirit. I love it.
All right. So let's also say to Jacqueline, inside the toolkit, there are 4 assessments, and you can evaluate the strength of your board, your technology, your development office, and your overall campaign readiness. So we do have different assessments as part of the toolkit. But we do have a capital campaign readiness assessment, which is essentially a fundraising strengths assessment, which is what you're asking about. And you can download it for free on the toolkit website. You don't have to be a member of the toolkit to grab it. And it's at capitalcampaigntoolkit.com/assess, ASSESS. So if you're looking for, I don't know if you're talking about a specific fundraising strengths assessment, but we do have a campaign readiness assessment that does assess your fundraising strengths. And it's at capitalcampaigntoolkit.com/assess. All right. Christine, you're asking, we're trying to strengthen our major gift program. Major can be subjective. You are so correct there. Is there a best practice for determining what would be considered major in looking at fundraising goals? Well, I think you're right, Christine. Major gifts, certainly, it's all relative, right? To a small social service agency, a major gift might be $1,000 or $5,000. To a university, they may not be talking about major gifts until 6 figures and up. Also, from the donor's point of view, $1,000 may be a major donor gift to some donors and pocket change to others. So certainly, the term major is subjective. So I think that it depends on who you have in your donor database, who you have on your board, what the experience and expertise of your organization and your fundraising staff are, will help determine, I can't speak today, what a major gift is at your organization. And I have a few rules of thumb about how to identify and how to determine what a good major gift is at your organization. One is the biggest rule of thumb: when the check comes in the mail and you jump up and down, not because it's $1 million, but because it only happens 10 or 15 times a year, not because it never happens, that might be a major gift at your organization. And there are really a few reasons to know what a major gift is at your organization. Number one is donor recognition. You're not going to recognize everybody in the same way. You can't put a plaque on the wall for a $5 donor, but you might be able to for a $5,000 donor. So donor recognition, you should have different things. If your executive director calls major donors to say thank you, you have to know what that means. One or two more things for major gifts, and then we'll move on, is you have to be able to know what a major gift is at your organization for time management. Is it worth your time to sit down with a donor to ask for $50? No, probably not. $1,000, if it is at your organization, then that might be a major gift at your organization. For some people, those gifts come in through the mail, online, so they might start major gifts higher. I guess the final thing I'll say on the major gifts topic, just because I'm passionate about it, is, you need it for metrics and tracking. So, are your major gifts going up or down? If you don't have a certain level that you're looking at, you don't know if your major gifts, if you got 100 last year of your major gift level, or 50 or 20. And so it is important to know, do major gifts start at $10,000, $5,000? What are you counting? What are you tracking? All right. I hope that answers your question. What's that?
The phrase major gifts, it's always interesting to me that, in some institutions, major gift means the top level gift. But in many institutions, major gift means a middle level gift, because you have leadership gifts and principal gifts, and maybe there are some even others that go up above that, right? Yes. You have a vice president for principal gifts at the, or a director of principal gifts at a large university. So it's important that you understand what you're talking about, and that will have, in some sense, the meaning will depend on the size of your organization.
For sure. Gary is adding mega gifts, and certainly there's ultimate gift.
Ultimate gifts. Yeah, that was an old Dave Dunlop phrase, to get the ultimate gifts. And there are people in big institutions whose job is only to work on those, these really, really, really big ultimate gifts. So the definitions do shift depending on the context for them.
Yeah. All right.
There have been some questions here that other people will know more about this than I do, for sure. But this question about what prorated amount of legacy gifts should you count towards a campaign? John has asked this question. They're an art museum. What percentage of the gift of art value should you count? Honestly, I don't know the answer to that. But is there someone on this call who has that experience with that in particular? Thank you for posing the question, John. I know there's a lot to know about that, and I hesitate to give you a quick answer that may well be wrong. So, Gary Bukowski, you probably know more about that than I do.
Well, so John's asking two questions, I think, in terms of the legacy gifts, which is an important one, but also art museum. So, maybe I was misreading it, but I was thinking they were also asking the question about the value of a pro bono, a gift of art, right? So that's a different question altogether. All right, let's see what people say in the comments, and then we'll circle back to that one in a minute.
Yeah, I mean, there are always these tensions between accounting and fundraising. And I think what to know about that is that they don't have to agree, right? You don't have to agree. You can have several ways of putting numbers towards goals. And what your accountant is saying it has to be what is only from their point of view. So if you wanted to, for example, you could say, if it were in your policies, that every legacy gift is counted 100% towards your campaign goal. You could do that, as long as you're very clear about what it is you're doing. Now, I'm not suggesting you do that. I'm just suggesting that you need in your campaign to have a set of decisions that are going to determine how you do that, how you will count legacy gifts. Right. My favorite way of counting legacy gifts is to count the number of gifts rather than the dollars from the gifts. And that's a very safe way to do it. Right.
Yeah. So let's get specific in case people don't know what you're talking about, Andrea. Right. So you might have a goal of 10 new bequest intentions. That's your campaign goal for bequests, right? It's not the dollar amount, because of course you won't realize that dollar amount for, 10 or 15 years. And you don't know ultimately how many of those dollars are going to come in. So it is a little hard or very hard to count those bequests. But what you can do is count new bequest intentions. You can count, 15 new planned gifts, something like that. John, I think, also often it's counted by age decade, right? So somebody who makes a planned gift or a bequest intention in their 90s, you count much more of that, because they're in their 90s. People who are in their 70s or 60s, you might count 50% of it. It may or may not come in. It may not come in for a while. Also, of course, you're going to count differently based on whether it's a revocable or irrevocable gift. So bequests people can take back. Other types of planned gifts are. So,
but here's the deal. You need to make a set of decisions about this up front, so you're not making it up as you go. You need to say, all right, for this particular campaign, if we get, Terry, I think you have said, if we receive notice of a bequest in direct response to a campaign solicitation, and it had a specific estimated value, you might add it to your campaign. That's a perfectly fine policy, but it needs to be a policy. Right? That you need to have a policy about what you're going to do with what do they call them? Matured bequests, when people actually die and you get the money in the door. What are you going to do with the money? Are you going to count it towards your campaign? Is it going to go towards your campaign, or is it not going to go someplace else? You don't want to be in your campaign and have it seem like you're making it up as you're going. To the extent you can be thoughtful about it beforehand. So there is a set of policies that says, here are the primary circumstances we expect to have, and here's what we're going to do about counting those gifts. It will benefit you. Does that mean that you won't have decisions to make as you go? No, you will. But to the extent you can think about these things beforehand, it's a really good idea. Gary Bukowski has said the case reporting standards and management guidelines is, that's one way to do it, to look at one of these standard practices. Being who I am, I have to say that you don't have to do things the standard way. Right? You can. It's a perfectly acceptable way to do it. But if you want to make it up another way, as long as you're clear about what it is, what the rules are going to be for your campaign, I'm all for it. At least floating those until someone more conservative says not to.
Right. So Susan's saying, if a gift of art, be careful deciding the value. You shouldn't do that. The IRS says the recipient is not allowed to make the valuation. The donor has to have an appraiser and estimate the value. And there's a specific IRS form to document this kind of gift. Good. Thank you, Susan.
There's an interesting question about who pays for those appraisals.
Yes.
Who pays for all that stuff. And you should have that in your campaign policies too.
Well, listen, here's our baseline policy. This is what we want you to live by, and what Andrea and I live by, is that as fundraisers, we are not giving accounting or tax or legal advice ever. Not today, not on this podcast, not on this Zoom, not in our blog posts, and you should not be doing that with donors either. Donors need to check with their own financial and legal advisors for every significant gift that they give as to what the tax benefits, what the implications are. And you work with your own accountants as to how you're going to be counting gifts. But to Andrea's point, you can recognize them for the campaign any way, which way you want. So as long as you do it consistently from donor to donor. Good.
Yes, Pam, thank you. I don't know why I keep forgetting the phrase realized bequests, but that's the perfect phrase for money that comes in the door after the donor's died, right? That's putting it really baldly, but that's what happens. This matured bequests is always a strange phrase. So realized bequests is what I was after. Thanks, Pam. Let's see. Yes, and Pam reminds us, I think, thank you, that appraisals are necessary for art gifts of over $5,000, right? I think there is necessary for all kinds of things of over $5,000. I have to tell you a story. I once years ago worked for a hospice and a campaign. It turned out to be a very successful campaign. But one of the things that happened is that a donor decided that he or she, I can't remember, was going to give what he considered a very valuable collection of miniatures made of some kind of metal to this hospice, right? And the hospice, I don't know how it came about, but they accepted the gift. Well, it turned out there were thousands of pounds of this stuff. And from what they could tell, it had just about no value whatsoever. But the poor development director, had to deal with it in a way that was respectful to the donor. So be careful what you accept is the moral of that story. Okay.
So I think we answered this question, but let me just read Carly's question just in case. I echo John's question. In a capacity building campaign, should we include legacy gifts? If so, do we include a prorated amount towards the overall goal? So yes, include them for sure. Why would you not want to include legacy gifts? The question is how you count them, what percentage, and that can be addressed in your campaign policies.
Right. So you can't include legacy gifts, or I wouldn't encourage you to include legacy gifts unless you have an endowment component to your campaign. If it's a straight building campaign, right, you're not going to realize cash from those. So you can't count it towards the building campaign. You can count it towards an endowment. Often people talk about above the line and below the line counting, sort of two different kinds of accountings, one for gifts and pledges, right? Cash for cash or securities, and the other for planned gifts of one sort or another, or legacy gifts. Those would be below the line. But be careful you're not accepting those gifts and counting those gifts towards something that will require an immediate cash need. So, right. Linda, let me address this. Linda, I think in response to what Amy said, Linda has asked, so you would not put out information about new tax laws and how they impact donations. You can certainly put out general information. Just say at the bottom of whatever you write, this is not official tax advice. Talk to your tax advisor. Right. Be sure you have a phrase that lets people know that you are not positioning yourself to be experts in that field. But by all means, there's a lot of stuff that is helpful to put out. Right. These days, I've been on a roll about getting people to give you money out of their retirement accounts so they don't have to pay taxes on their minimum required distributions for retired people. But you need to say, this is a great idea, but we're not tax people. You need to check with your accountant or attorney.
Hey, listen, Andrea, you know what? We are coming up on the 1-year anniversary of COVID, right? Of the United States shutting down. I mean, next week, right, is the 1-year anniversary. So we have been doing these calls for just about a year. And I was thinking back to to the earlier this year. And on these calls, we always asked for encouragement, inspiration, what people were doing to take care of themselves. And I think we should do that again today, because we have been doing these Zoom calls now and working from home and in this upside down world for 12 months, just about. And so I would love to hear in the chat how people are managing these days. What are you doing to take care of yourself? Let's hear some success stories, inspiration, whatever you want to share with us and with others, recommendations for relaxation. I don't know. What do you want to hear from people?
Something good that's come out of this. I mean, I think for a lot of people, there's actually good stuff that's come out of this sort of enforced period of isolation. I'll start with one. I actually like my husband better than I thought.
Oh, Tico, are you there?
No, he's not here.
Oh, all right. If you like,
right? If it was the opposite, it wouldn't be good, right?
Yes. If you like your family more than you thought you did, let us know in the comments. That is perfect. Yeah. I mean, there are some silver linings to this. I mean, there are lots of horrible things. And, I think that goes without saying. Certainly there's tragedy bound, but let's look for some silver linings. What good has come out of this? What are your lessons learned? What are you doing to take care of yourself? So let's just read some of these here. So Kathleen is camping with her family. Angelina is having bi-weekly massages and more family time. Yes. Diana has had time to work on ceramics in her ceramic studio and explore art. Let's see. Yes, Lynn, now that you've had the vaccine, is going on walks with friends. I think it's so important to really think about.
Melissa's practicing her violin every day. That's fantastic.
Excellent. And
Great.
Laura's watching this webinar right now from her deck outside. It's therapeutic and fun. Yay. Larissa, did I say that? I don't know if I said the name right the first time. All right. Wonderful. Amy says she volunteered at a vaccine clinic to pay it forward because she got vaccinated early. She walked over 10,000 steps and gave over 2,000 vaccines that day.
Wow.
Whoa. 2,000 vaccines at the end.
And how about Whitney? Oh, Whitney, this sounds fantastic. I want to come and join you. She curled up with a book, with a latte and a fire going. It calms her and brings her joy. I love that. Board games. Anybody doing puzzles? My husband and I are doing jigsaw puzzles. That's fun.
Andrea, you are invited over. My son got a puzzle, and apparently this guy, let me know who's heard of him. He's some social media influencer, and he created, I don't know how many puzzles, and it's a QR code. And if you put it together and you scan in the QR code, but it's just a black and green puzzle with little lines all over it, you could win $1 prize. So, oh my gosh, we've been working on this puzzle for 3 months and we haven't finished it yet. So anyways, Tony's become a grandparent twice over. That's excellent. I think that's just joy, right?
Right. Lynn, yes, I agree with you. Let's be honest, more Netflix. Like it. That's right.
Yes. All right.
No commuting, right? How about not having to get dressed? I love that, right?
Yeah. I noticed
clothes all day.
Yes. Excellent. So listen, I think that there is a lot more downtime for sure. There's more stress, but there's also, well, at least for lots of us, no commute, so there are some trade-offs, much more family time that can go both ways, I think. All right. What about fundraising or work successes or lessons learned? Let's talk just for a minute about lessons learned. One of the things that I think is so fascinating about this year is that we set up this capital campaign toolkit as virtual and remote as a support system for campaigns. And it really had never been done before. And we had experienced success coaching virtually and remotely for campaigns. And now almost everybody is on Zoom. And it's a proven model that you can have successful board meetings and campaign meetings over Zoom. And we're just, to me, that is one of the silver linings, that one of the things that we've been promoting and pushing and loving is now tried and true. It's not so outside of the box anymore to have virtual and remote campaign meetings. We're doing it successfully. We're seeing lots of organizations do it successfully. And, quite frankly, we now have a new form of soliciting major gifts, and that's over Zoom. And that really wasn't a thing a year ago. You would never have asked for a major campaign gift over Zoom. You would have flown to wherever the donor is and stayed overnight in a hotel. And now I think even when we go back, we have found that it is effective and affordable and efficient. Will we make every ask over Zoom? No, of course not. We'll sit down with our donors again, but there are going to be plenty of gifts in the future, I am confident, solicited over Zoom.
Lynn has commented here that everyone is more forgiving. And I have to say, I think that's right. I love seeing people's dogs and cats and kids running in. And I mean, it makes us all more human to one another. It softens the boundaries between being professional and being just a human being who's working to make the world a little better. And I think that's a benefit. I actually really like these Zoom campaign committee meetings, for example. It levels the playing field. You go into a room where you have some incredibly wealthy people and a student who serves on the board, and you can feel the sort of discomfort. You put everyone on Zoom, that somehow goes away, right? I don't quite know why, but it does, or some of it goes away anyway. I like that. So as Amy said, we've been doing this on Zoom for the Capital Campaign Toolkit. And one of the things that has really taken off for us, all of the Capital Campaign Toolkit members get invited to come to a group call on Wednesdays, actually now one of 2 group calls. And those calls have become so vibrant and supportive. I mean, there are some people who come every week, some people who are incredibly experienced, and they show up every week, and they give advice to people who are new and young in the business, and they're in touch with one another outside of of what the toolkit does. That never could have happened effectively otherwise. So it's quite exciting, really.
So I just want to read this comment from William. He closed several major gifts via Zoom this year. He says it allows you to increase the number of visits you can squeeze in during a week. And I think that that's absolutely true. So, I'm hearing that more and more from people, that people are around, they're willing to talk, they're wanting to talk. And, you can have back-to-back meetings as opposed to when you're driving around your town or flying around the country. You can only meet with a certain number of donors per week. But when you're virtual, that can increase exponentially. And honestly, it's like I'm sitting in your house right now. Andrea and I could be in the same room, or we could be a few states apart, and it almost doesn't matter.
Amy, you and I used to actually meet in New York every 6 weeks or 8 weeks, something like that. We'd go and meet somewhere downtown, and we haven't done that in a year. We haven't done that in a year. It was fun, but I'm not sure we need it, honestly. I mean, the fun part of it is that we'd go have a drink afterwards.
Well, now we can just stay home and have a drink.
Exactly.
We don't have to eliminate the drink. All right. Excellent. Let's see. All right. Who has other questions? I can't imagine that we questioned you all out.
Yeah, Pam Montgomery's made a good comment here. She says our donors come from all over the country. Now, Pam is in the Gunnison Valley. I happen to know in the Gunnison Valley in Colorado, which is a long, skinny valley, and they have donors up and down that valley, and a bunch of them go to Florida or wherever during parts of the year. So she says our donors come from across the country. We've been able to solicit six-figure gifts from donors 2,000 miles away, and that up close and personal face-to-face can happen virtually. Thank you, Pam. I know you, I remember working with you on that when it seemed such a challenge to figure out how to deal with these people who are only in the Gunnison Valley for certain portion of the year. So this has been good for you. All right, Amy. What else are we thinking about? I think we have worn people out with questions today.
We're going to wrap up early today, Andrea, and let everybody, you know what? All right. So we're going to give you 10 minutes back in a day that you didn't think you had. And I want everybody to commit to calling one donor right now to thank them, to check in on them, to ask for a meeting. I don't care what you call the donor about, but right now we're giving you a gift of 10 minutes. So in the chat, let us know that you commit to calling one donor right now.
Yes, great idea.
And we'll see you next week.
Yes,
okay.
Everybody's doing it. Everybody's doing it. Kathleen, Alice, and Amy. Yes, Rick. Fantastic.
All right, good. Yes, Nancy, Gary, Jody, everybody's going to go call one donor right now. You're going to either say thank you, ask them a question, check in, schedule a meeting, whatever it is. All right, good. All right, guys, we're going to see you next week. Thanks so much for joining us. Talk to you soon.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for joining Amy and Andrea for today's All About Capital Campaigns. To learn more about them and their work together, go to capitalcampaigntoolkit.com.